Welcome, everyone. We just watched the film Shakedown by Leilah Weinraub, and we have the director here with us. We're so fortunate tonight. Please welcome her.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you.
I'm Mireille Miller-Young. I'm professor in feminist studies at UC Santa Barbara. I'm so pleased to be in conversation with you. This film was amazing.
Thank you.
I have questions for Leilah, and then we'll be opening it up to the audience. I want to dive right in with this film. It's kind of in the style of a documentary, but it's not. Mm-hmm. I felt like it didn't have this same kind of problematic framing of an object that we need to inquire about, objectify, look after. Instead, it was kind of like a time travel experience to the late 90s, early 2000s. And we were brought in as participants and community members in a moment in time. And I wondered if, that was something that you were very conscious of as a filmmaker, deciding not to kind of objectify the subject and be more experimental in the form of the film.
Yeah.
Or not, okay.
I'm like, yeah, totally. No. Well, I think it actually starts with the show itself. As a person that went there and was like a patron and saw the shows, I guess I could just start with like Egypt. I think that she is a really powerful performer. Mm-hmm. And there's something about the space, the way that it's set up. Not something about it, it's everything about the space, the way it's set up, the way that I think Ronnie controls the room with the microphone. I think from the second you enter the room and pay to get in, I think everyone in the club kind of teaches you how to act in the club. There's a certain set of rules for that space. And I think that
Ronnie was setting out the rules for us too.
Yeah.
I felt like, okay.
Right. Also, Egypt kind of shows you how she wants you to interact with her. They're very much in command of the show and in charge of the way the shows happen and roll out, and the way that people that are watching the show get positioned and get to participate in the show. So they're very much in charge of their performance, and they kind of teach you how to be there. That's what I thought, or that's what I learned. So my job, I think, was to record the shows as best as I could and get as close to the feeling of what it was like to be there as possible. And I worked on the film for over a decade, almost 15 years. So everything I thought about in that time was through the lens of Shakedown, or Shakedown was through the lens of whatever I was thinking about. But it was guided originally just by trying to be there in the moment and record, just actually do a good job of recording it, and then try to make a document or object that accurately portrays the feeling of what it's like in the club.
Wow. Well, why were you there? How did you get there in the first place? And why were you the one with the camera?
Well, I asked just if I could work there,
Just because you wanted to be around?
Yeah, basically. I had just moved back to LA from Ohio. I went to college at Antioch. I studied film there, but it was called Media and Social Change. And I was working in documentary. I worked for a director in Los Angeles who is a big commercial director. And then in, what'd you say?
I said,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm in amen corner.
Okay. And then in Ohio, I worked for these documentary filmmakers that were, that make, I think, labor films. And Antioch is an anarchist, maybe lesbian school. And so that's where I was coming from.
Yeah.
And I was in Los Angeles, kind of figuring out what I was going to do. And I was at this other gay club called The Arena. Anybody know that? It's a mega club. There's like 3,000 people there.
Wow.
Maybe 2,000. Anyway, it's one of those big mega clubs. And after it was over, there was like the let out area, and I got a flyer for Shakedown, and the graphic design was really good. And I went to the club. The show was so spectacular, and I had never been to a lesbian club with that much, first of all, that many people in it, where everyone was like that attractive, you know? I mean, I you know, I went to lesbian clubs before in Ohio, but mostly they were like by the Air Force Base, like next to the cornfield, and like you would go and there'd be like a slat, and you'd have to like bang on the slat, and they would open it, and you'd be like, "Can I come in?" And they'd be like, "Sure." And then
that's deep underground.
Yeah, and then you would come in, there'd be like 2 people in there, you know, and I was into that, you know. I was into that like that vibe of like lesbianism being kind of like empty and alone and stuff.
But this was the opposite.
I had not experienced the other side where it was like really live and everybody was like so attractive, and that was really important to me too, you know. So I just asked if I could work there, and Ronnie was like, do you do anything that like we need, you know?
Can you be useful?
Yeah. And I was kind of like, sure.
I went to college for film.
I was like, I went for media and social change. Right.
Do you need any media or social change?
Right.
Yeah.
Which is like no camera training at all. Anyway, so I was like, I could take pictures. So I said that I would take stills, and then maybe they could use it in their ad, like to advertise a club. I did that for a while. It was okay. I mean, they were okay. They weren't the best. I think they took better pictures because like it was somewhere in between like advertising for the club and like how I felt about it. But I thought it was really static and frozen, and that one frame was not the right way to record what was happening. It was about everything that was happening in the room, like all the faces, and just like the vibe was the most important thing to record. So I tried to start taping the shows, and I like just went with a friend's camcorder. It was SD tape, and that dance, like with Egypt, where she has the blue wig on, is from one of the first nights that I taped video there. And I was like, I watched it and I was like, oh my God, this is, you know, it looked really good.
That was an incredible performance. And I'm nodding because around the same time, I was walking around LA with a camcorder, filming Black porn stars for my research.
Cool.
And so it's amazing to have that experience.
What year were you doing that?
So that was like 99 to 2010 or so.
Oh yeah. Same time.
Yeah.
I started in the end of 2002. And
wow.
I stopped in a little bit in 2010. I moved to New York to go to grad school, but I continued to film with Egypt and Jasmine until 2014.
Another similarity is that, you know, Egypt and Jasmine are so compelling. They're such amazing performers. And not only were their performances so dynamic, and I think you used the word alive, but they created a space around them that everybody was participating in, that we were participating in too as viewers, that was a space of desire, a space of joy, and a space of freedom. I think that, you know, for a lot of people who may be looking on the outside don't realize, like, first of all, the criticality of having a Black lesbian space at all, like you said, that it's often we have empty spaces or we don't own spaces. We have moving spaces, we have underground spaces, we have contingent spaces. And because our bodies are at risk, often our spaces are at risk. So I wondered if what you thought about, what's the importance of creating these spaces that they created in that moment? Why was it like significant to create these like really special moments of aliveness and community?
Well, first about like Jasmine and Egypt, they're stars, and I feel like if celebrity was like kind of democratized the way that it is now with Instagram, then
They would have been
for sure
Instagram stars.
I mean, they're just like they're definitely stars, and like when they come into a room, you can like feel all of that energy, They're obviously like celebrities and hold a room like that. And yeah, Egypt to me is like just like this American, like there's like this old school American character, kind of like the Godfather or like Scarf, you know what I mean? She just like has that kind of mind frame, and I don't know. Anyway, but
She was badass.
so there was a club next to Shakedown. There's a movie about it. It's called The Catch, and it was owned by the owner, who is a Black lesbian, and it was the longest running gay Black club west of the Mississippi until she sold it recently. It was just like a couple of years ago.
Wow.
So like I always think about Shakedown. I have to like kind of think about it again, how I feel about it. But I always feel like this is my personal history of Los Angeles, and like I'm from there. I'm like from the neighborhood that Shakedown is in and The Catch is in. My parents used to go to The Catch. The Jewel used to have a burger place called Catch One Burger, and we used to go there, And like in my history of Los Angeles, there's something about that neighborhood that is like shifted post the riots, I think that it was kind of like mid-city, it was a place that was like people would go to party there. And after the riots, it became like totally segregated again. There was a sentence in there where Hot Dog says that he was there before the freeway was built, which is like also like was a segregating I almost said sculpture.
Infrastructure kind of project.
Yeah. So to me, Shakedown is like about it being Black owned, Black run, and there wasn't a lot of tourism happening at that time. So there's a really special vibe that happened.
Yeah, you could feel it. You mentioned the riots too, and I got really anxious during the parts with the police. And I was really worried, and I thought it was interesting how people in the community there kind of took opportunities to speak back to the police, and also to try to take time to cover Jasmine when she was being cuffed, and those kind of moments of pushing back. And this is a community that was completely violated and turned upside down by the Rodney King case and the LA riots that you mentioned in the 90s. And I wondered, to what extent did the, fear of policing and the criminalization of Black spaces, have a presence in the club? Was it something that was constantly on people's minds, that we were going to get raided? Or how do people negotiate that?
I think in LA you like live in a state of being policed all the time. You like always know where there's a cop car, like So I think you're always acutely aware of the LAPD. Also, there's the sound of the city, like helicopters, and so I want to say like yes. People are acutely aware of the police. And then also, no, You know, it's not like a thing like, oh, we're gonna get raided. I don't think that was on anyone's mind. Raided. I guess that when that happened, when there was like when the police were coming like repeatedly, I thought that that's what the film was going to be about. I thought that the club was going to get shut down and that people were going to find out about it all over America, and that people that ran the club and worked there and owned it were going to be super upset and try to get it to open again, you know, and that the film was going to be about this like resistance, and that didn't happen. The vibe was more like, let's kind of get out of here and rebuild somewhere else like fast, you know? And I think there was just like some, yeah. I don't know. I guess I could say what I feel that is, but it was more of just like a pessimistic view of like, anyway, I also think that it's hard to understand how fragile the thing you build is, you know, and that it's really not hard. It's not that easy to rebuild it.
I think that's one of the things that's really unfortunate. Like at the same time that ballroom is becoming popular, there's a show about it on FX called Pose.
Yeah.
So suddenly everybody around, you know, in like Ireland and Korea are like, there's a ballroom scene, right? But the actual communities that it emerges from are like under intense fire and heat, and a lot of that kind of intensification of policing really, you know, came with this kind of move of gentrification to move people out of those spaces, right? And so the kind of desire to find space is part of that experience, and it's something that gets hidden by the kind of now global popularity of kind of Black gay culture. Do you think that, you know, what would you like people to know who really don't know much deeper than the TV show about the kind of lives of the people who were part of that community?
About ballroom?
Yeah, and about this kind of Black lesbian space that was Shakedown.
I feel like the film itself is like the document that I'm trying to like present, and in a way I feel like that's a gift, you know. There's a lot of like work that was created, and there's just a vibe around how to live that was kind of being expressed, and that it was important to me to capture that and also share that, you know. I think it was important for Jasmine in Egypt to be seen and for that to spread, you know. I'm like, isn't that
That's enough? Yes, yeah. Absolutely. I guess I was just wondering about the kind of, it feels like often Black culture is co-opted in the popular realm without much understanding about what it means for the people who live it. And, or there's a kind of, now, especially on social media too, a kind of easy appropriation of Black culture and styles. And people think if they can twerk, like, you know, there's like all these videos too of white people twerking in the Walmart as if it's transgressive and revolutionary. But you actually showed the meaning of where those kind of dances emerge from and what they signified for the people who are practicing them and consuming them. And it feels like it was very life-giving.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in some ways I think about it like from Egypt's perspective, like it's like would be cool and important if she gets to benefit from that in like large ways, like as a choreographer, is not only like inspiration to the work, but also gets to be is not only the original innovator and inspiration for other people's work, but then gets to like function in the economy that she's in, which is in entertainment, you know?
Right.
And yeah, all those questions are really big, you know?
Let me make it smaller too, in a way. I think that one of the things that I wanted to understand too is how you took 400 hours or more of film and made it into this. I mean, you said it was years and years of being there. What was the process of editing?
Well, it was I had the help of a lot of people, and there was an edit that was like 4 hours long.
Wow. This
is kind of missing. This film is like where I needed to start telling this story. I really thought that I was making. I thought that I was making a labor movie. I still think this is a labor movie. There was a lot of conversations and discussions with everyone in there that are not in this, because is it okay if I start a little bit before this?
Yeah.
Which is like, I guess, why it's coming out now.
Yes.
So
that's a great question.
Yeah, it was really hard for me to put the film out before. I just felt like there wasn't the audience and the world wasn't ready for it at all, and I was worried about having to like subject Egypt or Jasmine or anybody in the film to the scrutiny of an audience like before basically last year, or the year before that. And there was just not enough images of Black lives or Black people or like Black women and it kind of has to do with Obama, not like him, but just that time on Earth. Sometime after that, people were like, there was more images available just of like people, like Black people, like doing nothing or like swimming or family, like really just like nothing. And that was really important. That was extremely important because before that, it was hard to portray Egypt as who she is, which is she's infamous and she's notorious, and she's her own creation. And I felt a duty to portray her as a good person, and that there wasn't enough room for her to just be herself. And it was also because like people needed to see images of like Black people portrayed as good people, and that needed to happen before Shakedown could really maybe that sentence sounds insane, but like that was my like feeling about it, is that it was it just wasn't, or the world wasn't ready, or I just felt protective of the film and the footage. Okay, so that brings me to...
So the world is ready now, and we're so excited for it.
Yeah.
And how did you actually make it with all of that?
So that's what I was saying. No, so I needed to start with what the club was and how it feels to be there, to get into these like deeper conversations about generations and like inheritance, and like middle class Black families in California, and like where Egypt comes from, and her grandfather who worked at Firestone for 44 years, and he was really like kind of the center of that family, and kind of bought property, really set them up in a very particular way that seemed like was not an uncommon story. And that being different from Egypt's labor, which was more of like a gig economy. And anyway, and also like her work being like identity and like a performance persona or a fantasy that she creates, and also just like American labor and identity, that you just, all of our identities are so formed around like what we do. Anyway, so there's a lot of stuff that we talked about that was in a longer piece that didn't, it was hard to put it out there before this piece could exist. So I think there's other stuff that's coming out of this body of work.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad that you're focusing on labor, and I think it's really important to see these women's sexual performance as labor. And I think that I think it's really interesting to incorporate to this kind of range of performance, right? I was curious about what you felt like you learned about sexuality and gender, in that space, because it was such a rich space. You had this, continuum of genders. There's probably at least 6 genders at play in the space, right? From high femme to studs.
It made me know that like this high femme female persona like runs the world, turns the world, What did I learn about sexuality?
And I mean, in gender, I guess it seems like it's, and it's it can be very playful instead of very binary for one, right? But it seemed like these people were kind of innovating.
Right. It's so hard to say that in a sentence. I guess like, yeah, will you tell me more about what you think
I think that I feel like it was, the whole film was really creative in terms of constantly seeing people perform gender and sexuality in these really creative ways. And you also talked about legacy. So the footage from the 90s was really interesting because it's something that I feel like I can hear like, my great aunt saying, we didn't do that back in the day, kind of thing. But actually, we just saw the footage.
Yeah, right, exactly.
we saw the evidence. So
I know.
We've been doing this kind of creative play with sex.
Right. I was trying to figure out what the genesis of like lesbian stripping in LA was. And there was a lot of people that were like, I'm the first person to do a lesbian strip night in Los Angeles. And there was like 20 people that said that. And they're in their own way, they're all right. They all did it for the first time in their way, in their area. And like, also it takes all of those stories to kind of like create an accurate history of what happened. The footage I got was from someone named Cabrini, and she, I think, was hitting on my mom. And my mom referred her to me and was like, oh, my daughter's making a documentary about that in general. And so I interviewed Cabrini, and she had a night at the Catch, which is what we saw, the 90s, the 92, 93 footage.
Wow.
And it was just such a cool, special place. And then there were nights that would just like mix, where the beginning of the night would be like a lesbian strip party, and then the end of the night would be like a drag party, And so it wasn't like going to see the lesbian dance. It was like going to see the girls perform, Yeah. And that kind of led to like even more of this like solidifying of this like high femme thing, people working on that together in a way. So, yeah.
Which is great because at the time I feel like there was so much emphasis on masculinity and aggressives and studs, and this is like the first time I'm feeling like the femmes and high femmes are getting attention. Appreciate that.
Yeah. There was a lot going on in the queer community in the early 2000s. There was a lot of new ideas, and it was really like maybe like the conversation, or the things like being written about or talked about were about like a masculine perspective, but it was like, I just thought it was really important to highlight, to say that out loud, to say like high femme, and not like lose that that's an idea or a place,
That's
or
really
that's
important.
work, or
It is work.
Yeah.
Well, that's really, really interesting. I think in addition to this question of femme performance, something that came up, especially with the couple that had the child, which is so interesting too. It's like another way to show the importance of this labor for the community. It's like it literally reproduces the community.
Right.
Like they are off of this important labor that the dancers are doing. They're also paying for things like surrogacy, right? But something that they revealed in that great moment, and I don't know how you got that wonderful footage of the public access talk show, is this kind of question of homophobia within the community.
Right.
And
I thought that was really important to hear. I mean, I listened to the whole tape. They were on that TV show for 2 hours, and I was surprised by how supportive people were. There was a lot of people that would call in and be like, the Bible is a book, you know?
Wow.
And they would be like, you need to read it, and this is not right. But there was overwhelmingly like a lot of support from people. And, you know, then there's like filmmaking where you could like insert that as, you could problematize that. You could kind of like choose the bad stuff or choose the negative opinions and then make that like this thing as evidence of like a us against the world kind of vibe, you know? And there, we just thought it was really important to hear the less frequently heard is the, like older Black community weighing in on like the lifestyle of like a younger community in a positive way, which seems like important to know about.
And it's really complicated because I think Egypt also talks about the fact that some of her fans would have these kind of very homophobic reactions when realizing their own children might be gay. And that's one of those really difficult things within the community, is that there's all these layers of support and also like self-policing, and respectability, and kind of.
And that's, I mean, I understand that too, you know?
But it seemed like, I guess, the younger generation, and the way that she describes, like, it gave them something to, I mean, it was a space for older folks, but it also is a space of fantasy, and important for, like,
there was a lot of different
Black people.
ages at that club. I'm trying to remember his name. Anyway, sorry, the guy that was doing the TV show, he actually owned the club that Shakedown was at. They had 2 nights. They had one in Mid-City and one in Inglewood. And he owned this club called A Current Affair. And sorry, I'm trying to remember his name. He's such an important person. He was also, anyway.
That was a great moment. So one more thing that I really wanted to ask before we take questions is about your filmic influences. I'm wondering if you see yourself as part of like a tradition of Black LA filmmakers, or you know, who you were maybe inspired by in terms of like Charles Burnett and Julie Dash, in terms of their being experimental, or even Cheryl Dunier later, or if you see yourself in relation to like the kind of new school, the people like Ryan Coogler, who are, you know, kind of transforming the way, like you said, we're seeing Black people now as icons and heroes in movies like Black Panther, and we're having this particular moment of a lot of visibility in Hollywood and art. So I wonder if you have like affinities to particular filmmakers that inspire you and maybe shaped your experience.
I really love Watermelon Woman. That was really important to me. It was like also, what is that called? It was important, like I liked that there wasn't a history that existed that was documented, so like recreating it. That like really stuck in my mind for a really long time, you know? And Julie Dash and Charles Burnett, and even like Arthur Jaffa, all those LA experimental filmmakers. I love their work and know about it, and I think I'm inspired by them. I feel like I'm from a really particular group of people working together that's like outside of just film, you know? I just like have friends in New York that are artists and designers that work in like fashion, film, and art. And that we kind of like are in the same vibe. So yeah, I don't know.
So it's multimedia.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate all of those films, and I also like really wanted to be mainstream in a way. The soundtrack is like noise music, but I really wanted the people that are in the film to kind of get the vibe and aesthetic that I'm working on, which is specific, you know. I wanted them to get into it and feel like it accurately, like, you know, portrays something that they identify with, you know. So I'm into being experimental, but I also wanted to make sure that the people in the film, first of all, like really are like, oh, like Leilah, you know, like, I guess, you know, but they're really very much a part of it. I think that they,
What'd they think of it? Did Egypt see it?
Egypt has seen it a lot the entire time. She was a big part of the editing the entire time of the filmmaking.
Wow.
So there was a lot of very experimental, slow, like edits in there. And she, you know, it was good to have her feedback, and she has a very clear style herself, you know, and that I think really shaped my style. I mean, more than anything, I really think that working at the club shaped like my style, and I hope that like maybe I'm a child of Shakedown more than like Charles Burnett, you know?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. That's it. We're wrapping up. I want to thank Leilah Weinraub for this incredible film, and thank you so much for being in conversation with us. Thank you so much.